Hey guys, it's Niko from Steel City Vintage, and for today's video we're going to be going over a portion of my vintage watch collection. This is a video that I've been getting a lot of requests throughout my creation of Steel City Vintage, so I figured now is the time to go over a portion of the collection. So we'll get right into it. My first vintage watch was an Omega Seamaster. I'm sure none of you guys are surprised by that, seeing how much of a love I have for Omega. So this reference is a 2849. It's my favorite Omega reference to this day. So this watch is really special to me. It was purchased by my then fiance, now wife, upon my completion of physical therapy school. As a brief synopsis, if you guys aren't aware, that profession has now progressed to a doctorate program, and me not being the strongest student, it took me a while to complete. It was a long, tumultuous road with many barriers to that, and eventually in 2018, I was able to finally graduate. So she purchased this watch to commemorate that achievement, and it means a lot, obviously because of the person who purchased it, but also for the journey that it represents. It was a really difficult journey for me, and we went through a lot of hard times to get to that point. I didn't have a job. I was studying full time. She was an immigrant from Greece, and obviously not having graduated with any significant degree or anything, wasn't able to have like a career type job. So things were pretty tough, and she stuck by me the entire time. And when we had little to no money, she was able to save some up and purchase this watch for me. So this is one that's always going to be near and dear to my heart. I was a big fan of the date feature back then, because I thought that it was something that I would use. It was such a practical idea. I mean, who doesn't want to know the date? And just the sheer nature of vintage and how much of a tedious task it is to set it. I never use it, and I've since obviously grown out of liking a date. I just like the dial symmetry of no dates better. I'll probably end up making a video on this watch. What's cool about this reference too, and this is why I think vintage watches, there's just so much unexplored material out there, is this was the first caliber that Omega made with what they considered a quick set date function back then. And how it would work is you would advance the hour past midnight to 1, and then you would go back to 11 p.m. and you can go back and forth like that. So it still took 4 revolutions, which is a long time to change a date once, but that's better than 24. So it was an upgrade from a technical standpoint at that point. My next vintage watch is a quartz Tank Heuer Aqua Racer. This was purchased by my father-in-law and given to me on my wedding day. I love this watch. Like I've stated before, I'm not the biggest fan of steel, but like anything in this life, there are time and place for it. So I wear this with my work scrubs all the time in the hospital. It's quartz, so it just keeps on ticking. It's very accurate, can take a beating. So yeah, this is a great watch. It's a great daily beater for something like work. My next trip down the Omega world is my most requested watch to see if I'm selling. This is an Omega Constellation reference 14902, Pi Pan dial, full set box and papers, purchased from the original owner's wife. She was widowed. He had passed away at the time, and she decided to sell it. And I jumped all over it. It comes on what the collector community calls a peanut bracelet. This is important because this is a bracelet that Omega made for 1 year prior to moving on to the Beads of Rice bracelet, and that production is 1961 only. So this being a reference early in 1962 lines up right with that. So no doubt that it's original to the watch. It's in very similar condition. And like I said, having the provenance of the box and papers is really nice. As a vintage watch dealer, we tend to steer people away from that. Not because it's bad, but if that shouldn't be the point of emphasis, because papers can be forged or faked all the time. Boxes aren't tied to a watch specifically, so they can be sourced and kind of placed together with a watch, and not necessarily born with it at all. I mean, obviously you want to make sure it's period correct and correct for that model, but nothing ties it back to that watch. But when you have the provenance of purchasing it from the original owner, or the original owner's family, that's definitely the cherry on top. And while I get many requests, hopefully I'll never have to part ways with this one. I tend to wear this only during holidays. It's gold capped, which collectors tend to dislike because it's not able to maintain the original factory finish lines as much as something like steel or solid gold, especially when subjected to polishing. But this one is an amazing and crisp example. And then moving on in my collection, this next one is also a vintage Omega vintage Omega Constellation. This one was also purchased from the original owner's family. I purchased it from the son. So I had received a text message from a contact of mine who said, "Hey, I just had this walk through the door. Would you be interested?" And then after taking a look at the picture, I said, "Yeah, do not let him leave without me getting that watch." Now, it didn't end up working out like that. The gentleman did end up leaving, and me and him met a number of times before he was willing to part ways with it. And I was very, very happy to get it. He had, thrown the idea by his sons to see if they wanted Grandpa's watch. None of them were interested. They rather have had the money. I made a really, really fair offer, a really strong market value offer, and was able to get the watch, which I don't regret a single bit. I think that's an important part of this game, is making fair offers. So the original owner of this one purchased this watch when he was stationed in Europe. He was in the military, and he was on a German base. That German base was originally obviously occupied by the Germans during World War II, and then at which point in the 50s, I believe early 50s, the United States had taken that base over, and he was stationed there and purchased this watch while he was there, which is an interesting caveat or part. I hear a lot about people purchasing watches in these military exchanges. It seems like it's a common thing, and talking with either descendants of people who were in the military or direct people in it themselves, it seems to be a common theme for a couple of reasons. One of which is they have money coming in, but not anywhere really to spend it. So they're more prone to go shopping and things like that. And then the other thing is these watches were offered at heavily discounted prices compared to retail to the general public. So that was pretty enticing as well. So having the box papers, original purchase receipt, the provenance of meeting the son and getting his dad's story make this one worthwhile. It's an amazing watch. It's a pretty uncommon one for as far as vintage Omega goes. It's a waffle dial with crosshair, encased in steel, but has gold furniture, bumper powered. That's where my love for vintage Omegas are, and so it's early Seamaster and Constellation references with that bumper movement. For a couple of different reasons, this Seamaster that came after it is also bumper powered, and me being Greek and talking a lot with our hands, it gives a nice tactile feedback that I really personally enjoy. It's just another way to interact with the watch. This particular reference is a 2577 early first generation pretty early in that run, as well as we can tell with the drilled lugs here on this one. Similar to that previous constellation, it's another one that's a steel example with gold furniture, waffle dial, crosshair, bumper movement, all of those things. So another one, I have this one on a beads of rice bracelet. It's my only one that I have like that. I tend to really like straps, so I don't like to put bracelets on most of my watches, but it is nice to have one as a grab and go, from time to time. Next up, I have a vintage Vacheron Constantine reference 4073. I really, really like vintage Vacheron. I think that in the watch world, as prices tend to increase, there's always value to be found in some brand. And for many, many years now, I think Vacheron is one of those brands. Not that they're inexpensive watches, but they're inexpensive relative to what they are. So a Patek would cost, easily 3, 4 times as much as this watch, yet you're getting just as much watch for the money. From like a standard of movements, they both commissioned other companies like JLC for their e-Bausch's, yet Vacheron, to my opinion, finished their movements to a higher degree, certainly at least to the same standard. Their history predates that of Patek. They've been around since 1755, the longest continuously running Swiss watch brand. So having that history behind it, they were made in far, far limited numbers when compared to Patek Philippe. So from a rarity standpoint, they're much more rare. And then the dials, they made just as intricate and hard to manufacture and time-consuming dials as Patek Philippe did, with the twice-baked enamel dials. This one specifically is incised, so somebody had taken an instrument and carved into the dial the Vacheron and Constantine Genève, and then backfilled it with black ink, baked it again, giving it this raised, textured 3D look to it, which I really love. They did that again with the minute track and the sub-second dial. I'm a really big fan of time-only, small, precious metal, manually wound watches. While I appreciate complications, I like a time-only watch better. It fits my style better. And, from a design standpoint, I think it's really, really difficult to nail a time-only watch. You can't hide behind complications. So you have to have the proportions and the layout and the dial configuration and everything just perfect. But I do like a sub-second dial. I think it breaks the monotony of a time-only watch up a little bit, gives it just a little bit more depth to the dial. And this one is also hand-applied Roman pink gold hour markers. It's two-tone steel and pink gold. And we know that Vacheron didn't really use steel, especially, pre-70s, to a high degree. They were more prone to using precious metal, so finding one not only in steel but steel in two-tone, steel and pink gold, that is, was a very difficult task. It's, to my knowledge, and as much as I've studied Vacheron, I've never seen another one. So I really, really love this watch. And then last up is my most recent purchase. I spoke about this watch in a different video, but just to recap, this is my personal Cartier Tank Louis Paris style, French-made, French hallmarks, Jaeger movement from 1968. I talked in the other video about how limited Cartier's production numbers were at that time. Pre-1970, it was very, very limited. Cartier made very, very limited, production numbers pre-1970. So finding one is extremely difficult, and then finding one with an all-original dial that's unrestored, untouched is, next to impossible. These watches weren't, very waterproof, and then just, the sheer dial manufacturing component of it, they were prone to cracking in the lacquer and things of that nature. So finding one that's clean, free of cracking, is difficult. And then just taking a look at that movement, that Jaeger movement, when compared to the Swiss watches that used ETA movements. It's a joy and a pleasure to look at. Having the extended cabochon crown, sapphire cabochon crown, is great. And then the Swiss hallmarks, like I said, when you're able to see one in person and see these hallmarks that are difficult to find, it's been a pleasure. It comes on its original deployment clasp. It also comes with the original box and a really cool Cartier strap that I don't think was originally sold with the watch. But like I said, these straps have to be made custom made, which adds that luxury component to it, knowing something was made for your wrist, but also having the deployment clasp on top of it. I was very, very happy and excited when I got this one. So that's going to wrap this portion up. Like I said, this is a portion of my watch collection. There are others that maybe we'll get into in another video, or we'll do an update as this collection kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, as new opportunities come up. Unfortunately, some of these will probably have to go. Obviously, there are some that I'll never part with, but as the collection evolves and my interests change, so will this, and we'll do an update video in the future. Thank you guys for tuning in. I can't thank you enough.